argument. They are pushing for this withdrawal of the corruption charges against President Jacob Zuma to be reviewed. Do they have a case?
Well, one can never know if they have a case unless one has seen the tapes. But the general grounds for reviewing a matter, I think that they're going to rely on is that the decision maker was biased. And what you're effectively saying there is that the person who is supposed to make the decision is relying on the unwarranted dictates of others. So they're not making this decision independently. The second ground that they're going to rely on is that the decision is not reasonable or rational. And what we're looking for here is that the link between the information that was before the NDPP and the decision that was eventually arrived at. And there must be a rational and reasonable connection between the two. And also, so those are the two things that you look at that I think they're going to rely on. But there are 7 grounds that a review can be brought on. And those grounds include whether the person who made the decision had the authority to do so. They include the process that was involved. And the process element is twofold. One, did the decision maker follow the process that emanates from the law that governs that person, and also whether the decision was generally adhered to the general principle of procedural fairness. And those things would be the typical ones that are founded even in common law. For example, whether they gave the other party a chance to hear the other side. So those are the 7 elements that they'd be looking for. But generally, I think this application is going to be resting primarily on the 2, which is the fact that it was biased and that it's not reasonable and rationally connected to the information that was before the decision maker.
Now, what are the chances of success given the magnitude of this particular case?
Well, the chances of success have little or nothing to do with the magnitude, because when you're reviewing a matter, you base it, it's the review, you base the records. So it's the records and examination of those 7 principles that I've spoken of, whether it's a small matter, whether it's a big matter. So a small matter could be anything by a decision by the Home Affairs not to issue you with an ID, or the decision not to proceed with a criminal prosecution. Those are the same principle apply irrespective of the magnitude of the matter. And the test will be, did the decision maker, in this case the NDPP, exercise his discretion judiciously? Did he make an error of the law? Is his decision rationally connected to the information that was before him? So you can't ignore relevant information, and you can't also take into account irrelevant information. So I think the sense that I got from the utterances by the DA leader was that there's dictate from, there's reliance on information that was not there, and there's unreliance on information that was there. So that's the play of the words that we're going to be seeing when this review eventually goes ahead.
Now, this all sounds very complicated, but for the man in the street, we need to understand this. What is so explosive on these tapes why they were kept for almost 5 years by the MPA?
What's explosive is if what's in those tapes has led to the decision to withdraw criminal prosecution, that on its own means that in those tapes must lie something so profound that it would justify the decision by the NPA. Now, that's the exact inquiry. So what we're doing when we're reviewing, you're saying somebody else was vested with the decision-making powers, and that person has made this decision. But that person is not the be-all of decision-making. So that person has got to be subject to court scrutiny. And that's why we have the provision for review. So where we're saying, you as the head of the National Prosecution Authority have made this decision, where did you make this decision in the best interest and in compliance with your mandate as the head of the NPA? And that's the scrutiny that we're going to be seeing. Well, one can never know whether there is grounds for all of this excitement around these tapes until one has actually had sight or even heard the tapes. That is the only time you will have the ability to make a fair judgment on whether the decision by the NPA was warranted or not.
Are the contents of the tapes, in fact, I was rectified the other day by the NPA, it says it's not tapes, it's digital recordings of the so-called spy tapes. Will they be made public once the matter goes to court?
Well, the principle of law is that the justice system must be open, it must be seen, just the requirement for justice, that it must happen, but it must also be seen to happen. And it is based on the principle of openness and accessibility. So so the premise, we'd move from the premise that the spy tapes or the digital recordings must be made available to the public. There are exceptions to this requirement, unless somebody can show that there's some harm that will befall some other person, other national security will be compromised if the tapes are publicized, some harm will befall a particular individual or some danger. But otherwise it must be made public.
If the DA succeed in court, what would be the next step?
Well, if they succeed in court, the judge or the High Court can make one of three findings. They can confirm the decision of the NPA. They can reverse the decision of the NPA and replace it with their own judgment.
If you say confirm, that means that the decision will stand.
They can say what? The NPA exercised its powers in terms of the law, so their decision is not reviewable. So that's the first outcome that can come from this. The second outcome is, well, the High Court can say, well, we don't think that you've considered this matter, go back and reconsider the matter. The third possibility is they could replace the decision of the NPA with their own decision, so they can make a completely new decision.
And what would be that decision? Because we are currently, as we stand, it's either review or not.
Well, the review is going on, so whether it's reviewable. So when you, so the first one is, if it's not reviewable, that means the NPA was correct, and everything that the decisions of the NPA shall stand as they are.
Okay.
If it is reviewable, that is when they say, well, you've made an error, and this is how you've made that error, go back and reconsider the matter. That decision to go and reconsider the matter is actually, or in effect, a review of the original decision. So go back and decide this thing and make sure that you adhere to procedure 1, 2, 3. Okay. Or it could arrive at a completely new decision and make up its own mind. So in other words, place itself in a position that the NPA originally was, say, now that I've been vested with these tapes, and now that I've considered the representations that were made by the president, what decision should have been made, and effectively make that decision for the NPA.
I see where you're going to. Now, the court process for the last DA court bid lasted almost 5 years before they got the tapes. How long is the review process likely to be?
Well, I don't foresee that it will be as long as 5 years, 2, 3 years at a stretch.
2, 3 years. Yeah. That's still a long time, though.
It is, but you know, that's the nature of justice. You know, if you're going to apply for a trial date, which they're very far from applying for a trial date, you're looking in any high court, you're looking at a period of at least a year. So, assuming that the paperwork is completed within 1 year, then you've got to apply for the hearing date, meaning that another year. So you are looking at approximately 2 years. And I imagine as well, all the technical issues I said have been resolved and dealt with. So I don't foresee that there will be any more technical issues that come up. So 2 years is a reasonable estimation.
Michael, thank you so much for giving us clarity of thought here in the studio. Thank you for joining us here on air.
Great pleasure, Elvis.
That was Michael Motsoeneng, who is an attorney from MBA Incorporated, giving us the lowdown on that. Right now, it's time to take a look at your weather forecast with the weather doctor, Philip Hawkins.